This is Lenny Cameron
Ashley Hasty.
and we are so excited because we've never actually done one of these podcast interviews together before. And the reason we thought it would be fun to do it together is we have our first author who is actually two people with us. Ali Brady is
Hi.
hey guys, is a combination of Alison Hammer and Bradeigh Godfrey. So we've never done this. This is going to be a bit of an experiment to do a 4-person interview, but what the heck? You guys are very special being a 2-person author, so why the hell not?
I'm
I
excited.
love it. Yay.
Okay, so let's start with where are you joining us from? I think you're in the middle of your book tour, right?
We are 1 week into our 2-week book tour. At the moment, we are in Destin, Florida, where the book takes place at my dad's house. So we're outside. It's a beautiful day, and we're getting the beachy vibes for sure.
Perfect for this book, which is called The Beach Trap. Ashley, over to you.
Well, this book just came out last week. Oh, we all have our copies here. For those readers who have not yet read the book, can you tell us a little bit about what it's about?
Sure. So we initially envisioned this book as sort of a twist on the Parent Trap. So we have 2 girls, 12-year-old girls, meeting at summer camp and becoming best friends. But then by the end of the camp, they've learned that they're sisters. They share a father. They're half sisters. And there's some, family secrets in there. So this shatters their friendship. They don't speak to each other for 15 years until their father leaves them a rundown beach house in Destin, Florida.
So they, get together again 15 years later after having not spoken, and they get this house, and they each want different things. One of the sisters wants to keep the house. It's a place where she has special memories. The other one needs money, and so she wants to sell the house. So instantly they're at odds. And then they spend the summer. They agree to work on the house. It needs a lot of renovations. So they work together, repairing the house and their relationship over the summer. And they both have, they each have a love interest. So it's a sister story, but it's also 2 romances for the price of one.
And this is the first book you've written together. And I know there's a pretty cool story about the inspiration behind it and how it sort of came to be. So can you tell us that?
Really, we started out as critique partners. We met, the story goes that I did a little light stalking of Bradeigh. We are both members of the Women's Fiction Writers Association, and I read like a 250 word snippet of her writing, and I was just like, oh my gosh, she is so good. I want to be her friend. And there was an opportunity, I think almost a year later, to trade pages, and we traded pages and really liked each other's writing style and critique style, and it went from there. And I remember the day that she called me her CP, which is her critique partner, and like going steady for writers.
Yes,
so
we're exclusive.
We're exclusive.
No one else.
Yeah. So that's like kind of a little bit about how we met. And then do you want to talk about how we like made the jump and where this Ali Brady came from?
So it was spring of 2020. We were in lockdown like the rest of the world was. And we were just chatting about book ideas. And I remember I was sitting at the dining room table with my kids. Like they were homeschooling, right? Everybody's homeschooling. Alison was working from home, and we were chatting about book ideas. And she was telling me about an idea that she's had. And I said, that actually goes really well with an idea that I've had. What if we put them together and write a book together? And that's how it happened.
So can I ask what the 2 ideas were that kind of merged into The Beach Trap?
Sure. And it's not The Beach Trap, in fact.
Yeah, so this is where, we've had this experience as solo writers and also as a duo. It's very common that your first book doesn't sell. And for us, the reason our first book didn't sell, it will find its way out into the world. It took place in the pandemic. It's called Shelter in Another Place. And editors thought that it was just too soon to do something with the pandemic, but they loved our writing. They loved like kind of our duo-ness. And we had given a paragraph. So really like The Beach Trap started, like Bradeigh said in the beginning, that it started as a twist on the Parent Trap. And from there it just grew. But our editor saw that and she's like, that's a book that I would like to read. And so we worked really fast and we put together 5 chapters and then an outline. And our outlines are so detailed. The editor was like, where'd the dialogue go? She didn't realize she had gone from like the chapters to the outline. So the origin story, I guess, of Ali Brady was for another book.
I love that. And I know that, Alison, you write really detailed outlines. It always amazes me. I've had the joy of being a critique partner in little tiny ways as well with you. And I am actually amazed that you have a similar style, right? That you're able to do those detailed outlines. And I want to ask you more about that. But before I do, because I'm fascinated on how you write a book together. I'm sure that Ashley is too. Like I can't even get my head around how you do this. But before I do, I want to say a couple of things about the book because, like you said, I was lucky enough to read an early copy too. It's a beautiful book. Oh my goodness, the conflict that you ramp up in this book between the two sisters, like they have every reason to want different things, and it works so well. It's so juicy. Like this book has got so much juicy conflict, but it's sweet and it's beautiful. And oh my goodness, I had a book hangover. I was genuinely sad when it was over, and I was like, I want to go back. I want to go back into their world. Take me back again. And that's a skillful writer, or in this case, pair of writers who can create a world that you want to plunge back into the second you turn the last page. So congratulations. And I'm going to read one quote from Ali Hazelwood, who people might know as the New York Times bestselling author of The Love Hypothesis. And I think this captures it so well. She said, "An enchanting, heartwarming story about the families we're born into and the families we choose for ourselves, full of beauty and hope and reminders that it's never too late to roll up our sleeves and rise above the mistakes we made. I cheered, I cried, I swooned while reading about Blake and Kat, their journeys to finding love, to finding themselves, and to becoming the sisters they were always meant to be. Take this book on vacation with you and let its heart and humor sweep you off your feet." What a beautiful endorsement from, I mean, I would say that Ali's like a rom-com writer, right? Like, or would you call her women's fiction? Where would you slot her books?
Yeah, she's
Rom-com.
romance and STEM, and we just adore her. She is brilliant. Her books are amazing, and she's an incredible human.
Absolutely. And I love that it's a rom-com writer who wrote you this review, because I do think this book, I actually wrote my own review, has serious rom-com vibes. I mean, it's women's fiction, it's a sister story, but then you've got two romances going on, one for each sister during the book as well. And there's just that beautiful gooey tone of a rom-com in it as well. And I think that was really nice to get that into like a serious topic around sisters dealing with conflict, but you've got that beautiful tone of, you feel warm and gooey and you just want to stay in the world, like I said. So I can't wait to ask you, how did you write and edit this book together? Because, you know, it's hard enough to write one book by yourself and edit it maybe with the help of an editor, but you guys have got like two writers, two agents, two different, you know, approaches maybe. Tell us how that worked.
Well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with the big outlining. I think, you know, in the writing world, there's plotters who plot everything out, and there's pantsers. And, you know, we tease that we share a brain sometimes, but we don't share a brain as so much that we can't plot it out and do a lot of work in the beginning and a lot of outlining to make sure that we are all on the same page. So, and then I also think that because we were spent so long as critique partners, we really work, the way we work works well together. And so that was really natural. But do you want to talk about the details?
Sure. So like Alison said, we do a really extensive outline. So we know exactly what's happening in each chapter. We've mapped out the character arcs. We know where the conflict is hitting. And then our typical schedule is we each write one chapter a week, and then we swap at the end of that week and let the other one read and edit the chapter. And so each chapter, it was drafted by one of us, but then the other one edits it. And then of course, as we revise, we just go through it over and over and over again, smoothing it all out so that the goal is that it should feel like it's been written by one person.
Well, I'll tell you that I know Alison's writing. I'm actually excited to read Brady's writing because her own is a thriller, right? That's coming out later this year. So I'm so excited. I'm on the NetGalley list. It's gonna be mine. I'm gonna have my fingers on it soon. But I know Ali's style, and it's really interesting because I will tell you that I couldn't tell. So I like had a theory, a hypothesis on who wrote which chapter, but then I would see touches of the other person in the other chapter, and I would be like, wait, I thought I knew it, but now I see Alison in this chapter that I thought was written by Bradeigh, and vice versa. I'm like, oh, that's so clever and funny. I think that's Bradeigh, but it's in the Alison chapter. So you really couldn't tell. Like it's almost impossible, at least for me. And I know, you know, at least one of you are writing pretty well to be able to tell which was which. So well done.
And let me tell you, I love getting texts from people who are reading it. They're like, I think you're Kat. Oh, wait, maybe you're Blake. Oh, but I think you're Kat. And it goes back and forth. And like, that's our goal. Like Bradeigh said, like we want it to feel like it was written by one person. So like, that's been such a fun experience having people try to guess.
And when you edited it, was there anything that is really different than where it started that readers who are loving it now might be surprised to hear changed along the way? Like, did you ditch any characters, or were there significant changes, or was it because you did this outline, was it pretty close to where you started?
It was pretty close. I mean, we worked a lot of that out in the outline phase. I will say that we amped up the spiciness level of the love scenes at the last moment.
Like the last moment.
When we were doing copy edits, like the last chance you get to really make any significant changes. And we amped that up quite a bit. So just, it was like, you know what, people have read this book. People are reading this book. They're rooting for these characters. They're rooting for the love interest. Let's just give them a good finale to the, you know what I mean? Like they want to feel it. So let's give it to them.
So, and funny story. So Bradeigh did that with her, the chapter that she wrote, the sex scene she wrote. And it was so good. And she upped the steam. I'm like, that's not fair that your character has a better experience than mine. So will you do that to mine? So she upped the steam in mine. And I made a couple tiny tweaks to get it, you know, more, just a few tiny tweaks. But she is really good at adding the steam.
And Bradeigh, you've got kids, right? Do you like hide away when you're working on your sexy scenes, or how do you manage that?
Yes. Funny story. The very first like open door steamy scene I ever wrote was for that first manuscript we wrote. And I started writing it at the table with my kids that were homeschooling. And I was like, nope. And just shut the computer and walked away. But usually, yeah, I mean, now we've written a few. So it's feeling like not like such a big deal anymore. It was at the beginning. I really like writing them, and my kids are too young to read them, but hopefully when they are old enough, you know, they'll have grown up in a home that makes them feel like, you know, everybody deserves to have great sex. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we usually tell each other when we're writing that scene, and then like, it's usually, you know, like in an evening or something like that. And we send each other gifts, like suggestive gifts, like, how's it going? and that sort of thing. But it's interesting because like Bradeigh said, we've now written sex scenes for 6 different characters, and they're all different because they should be right for that person and their growth and their character and their journey. But Bradeigh is more comfortable with it than I am, and she's really good at it too. So it's one moment where I'm really happy to have a co-author.
I know you both worked really hard to get to this place, both on your solo careers and as your career as Ali Brady. So I want to know, what advice do you have for aspiring authors?
Good question. There's so many things. I'll pick 2. The first one is something that I always need a reminder of, and that Bradeigh's really good at reminding me, is that the first draft's job is only to exist. As writers at any level, we're all really hard on ourselves, and it's supposed to be hard. Like if it was easy, like anybody could do it. But like, be easy on yourself on that first draft. And the other biggest piece of advice is to find your people. I've had writing groups for every level, every step of the way. When I was queering, I had a group of other queering writers, and there's nobody else. Like your family and friends can like empathize with you, but nobody else who hasn't been through it knows like the joy you can get from getting a rejection, because it's better than silence. And like every step of this process, publishing is so difficult, and every step has its own challenges. So find your people, because writing is not a solo sport, and there's an amazing community that's super supportive, and just find your people.
Yes, I agree with both of those. And I'll just add, finishing is really important. So you've got to finish. If you're going to write a novel, you need to write it all the way to the end. You need to revise it, and then you need to start submitting it. And then you need to start writing something else. So you cannot, if you're going to be an author, if you want to have a career at this, you need to continually be writing, editing, submitting, and just get into a rhythm, because that's what you're going to do once you hopefully have, you know, book deals. You're going to be continuing to do it. So just getting in the habit of doing it, always finishing. And then my opinion is move on to the next thing instead of getting stuck on the same thing, working it over and over and over 10 different ways.
Great. And so, talking of writers you admire or books that you enjoy, any good recommendations to make for us on the reading side?
Oh, so many. Do you want to go first?
Yeah. So I have a couple things I'll recommend. So I recently read The Unsinkable Greta James by Elizabeth Smith, and I really loved it. It's a father-daughter story. They go on a cruise together that the mother was supposed to take with the father, but she passed away. And it's dealing with grief and loss and finding yourself. There's a little bit of a love story in there, but that's not the point of it. And I really loved it. And then I'm also going to shout out a book that had the same pub date as us. It's called How to Fake It in Hollywood by Ava Wilder. And it is much deeper than you think. going in, because it's a fake dating between two Hollywood stars, movie stars. But it's much deeper than you think, and they go through a lot. They fight through a lot to get their happy ending. I really loved it.
So we're kind of, you might call us nerds. We just finished listening to our own audiobook. They did a really good job on our audio. We've been flying a lot, and so we've been sharing iPods, AirPods, and listening to the audio. So the audiobook has been good. But two other books that I would love to give shout outs to. One is 4 Ways to Wear a Dress by Jillian Libby. It is like sisterhood of the traveling pants all grown up, plus like surf culture. So like a little Gidget vibes. And I just absolutely loved it. And then another one I'm almost finished listening to is As Seen on TV by Meredith Shore. People who loved Book Lovers by Emily Henry would love it. It's very like Hallmark movie versus reality, and it's really great.
So I always love to ask if there's anything we missed, and I also want to make sure that we hear about Brady's book that's coming in the fall, if you're willing to tell us a little bit about it. Why don't we start there? Tell us a little bit about the one that you're also bringing out in the fall.
Sure. Yeah, this is coming out in September. It's called Imposter. It's a psychological thriller. And interestingly, it's also about two sisters, but very different vibe than The Beach Trap. So in Imposter, these two women have not talked to each other for 3 years. They've been estranged. They had a big falling out. And the younger sister reaches out to the older sister and wants to get together again and says, I have a matter of life and death to discuss with you. But on their way to the restaurant for dinner, they get into a car crash in the middle. It's a snowy night. They get into a car crash, and the younger sister ends up in the hospital with a brain injury, can't communicate with her. And the older sister is pretty certain that there was somebody following them before the accident. It wasn't really an accident. It was a crash that they were hit. And so she really wants to figure out, what was my sister going to tell me? Who was following us? And what's the secret that my sister is keeping from me? So it's twisty, it's fast paced, and there's a lot of medical fiction weaved into there and psychiatric issues as well.
It is really good. And the medical stuff, Brady's a doctor in addition to being an author with, Ali Brady and her own, but it's very, very good.
Awesome. And it's coming out in September, that one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yay. I think, Ashley, you had one last question here.
I have one question before the question that you are expecting, but Bradeigh asked me this at the Chicago book launch event, whether I identify more with Blake or Kat. And I said, I particularly felt like I was more Blake with like touches of Kat in there. So I want to ask both of you how you feel. Do you identify with one character more than the other?
That's a good question, and it's interesting. In nonfiction, people are looking for, a lot of readers look to see things that are not true because it's supposed to be true. And in fiction, people kind of look for things that are true in the authors. And I think that we both put pieces of ourselves into the characters, but I don't think that they're definitely not us.
They're not us.
But I feel like I've got probably more pieces of Kat in me. I'm not handy at all. But I've got probably a little bit more Kat than Blake, but I probably have a little bit of Blake too. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. They're really not us. Blake is more of an introvert, which I think I am as well. But she's very handy and she's very practical. And I'm not as handy as she is either. Although I have done some home renovation stuff like she has. We painted our kitchen cabinets. I've helped my husband with things, but not quite as handy as Blake. But I do think it's interesting because Kat has a lot of character growth in the book. And there's some times when she, maybe responds in a way that may seem more immature. And sometimes as readers, we like to call that out in characters and say, oh, why can't she, just resolve this like an adult? But like, even we're real adults and we sometimes don't resolve things like adults. Like we sometimes act like teenagers for a minute before we kind of get over it. But it's normal. Like people don't always act with maturity every minute of the day in real life.
I don't know what you're talking about. I do.
Lainey, what about you? Did you identify with one character more than the other?
Oh, it's interesting. I identified with, so Kat in the book is a social media influencer, and she's definitely at various points feeling the pressure of like, what are you like to the external world versus what's going on in your own personal life. And so I identified with that. Like there are moments where I'm posting pretty pictures on Instagram, but I'm feeling not well physically. And I don't always want to be on there saying like, I'm having a bad day. I don't feel good. And so, yeah, I identified with that kind of almost a disingenuousness sometimes, feeling like you want to just tell it like it is, but maybe that's a bit too much oversharing on social media. And so definitely I identify with that element of Kat. but I also identified with kind of the pragmatism of Blake. I'm a pretty pragmatic person, I think. And so I think Blake was a bit more on the pragmatic, just like the world isn't always perfect, get it done kind of side. And so I thought they were both fabulous characters, and I related to both of them, really.
Yeah. So where can we find you on social media?
We are everywhere. Probably the most active on Instagram. We are at Ali Brady Books.
And we'll put all the links on the episode page on the website at bestofwomensfiction.com, as well as the links to all of the books that you've recommended.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Oh, you are so welcome. And it's so fun to have friends on as well. And I was lucky enough. If people follow my social media, you'll see that both Ashley and I were lucky enough to go to 2 of your book tour events in different locations. And so that was so much fun. And so this is Lainey Cameron, and
this is Ashley Hasty.
And we're wrapping up for the season.
It's our last episode, and I think if I counted correctly, this was our 99th episode. So I think our next one needs to be something special.
Yeah, and so we'll be back in the fall with a special episode, number 100 for the podcast. And also, I want to point out that if you are listening and you have recommendations of authors of women's fiction that you think are among the best of the best and we haven't had them on yet, feel free to send a little note or message to Ashley or myself. And if you're an author and you're listening, we have a form on the website where you can request to be considered for the podcast. It has become quite competitive. We get hundreds of people requesting to be on, but we love to feature in particular diverse books that tell stories that haven't been told. So you'll see on the forum, we actually ask you that question. We ask you why you would be a great pick for the podcast. And we're very thoughtful and we read every single submission. So I do encourage you, if you think that you might be a fit for the podcast, please go ahead and submit that form. We'll be going in about a month through all of the submissions for the fall. And I'm so excited that we got to end this season with Ali Brady. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.